There is something that we are up against in organizations where people think they know what DEI is. And then when we come in and we actually explain what DEI is, they go, that's it? It's all, what? It's train the people managers to actually treat people like humans.
Yeah.
It's leadership development. It's developing better systems and policies and procedures. It's strategic development so that we can close the gap between our goals and what we did here and then have exponential results in the next 10, 20 years.
Lindsey T.H. Jackson, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lindsey is the founder and CEO of LTJ Global, an artist at heart and a visionary in action. Lindsey have dedicated over 20 years to empowering voices around the globe, leading with authenticity and igniting change through her profound storytelling and entrepreneur spirit. You were on New Day Northwest on King 5 recently and mentioned that America as a country is a DEI program. Diverse background, multi-ethnicity people come together to create something new. I resonated with that so much because I'm an immigrant from a very homogenous country. So when I came here and saw the diversity, I thought diversity in America is one of the biggest strengths. So could you elaborate more on that?
Yes, yes. At the same time, as you say that, I'm thinking about what it must be like to experience that type of cultural recognition. The diaspora of being African American in the United States means that I don't have that. And so I'm just really struck by and wondering at how that has shaped you to know where your people come from.
Right. When I first came here, you just don't see that. You don't understand it. The first thing that I saw was like just different people, how they look different and how it's just like America, they call America as a melting pot. And I came as an outsider coming in with eyes wide open, almost like, wow, this is new country. How do I navigate this? So there's like almost a honeymoon. There's different phases of living as an immigrant. Yes. So there's a honeymoon period. There's the learning period. There's multiple periods. So when this specific to this diversity in America as a strength, when I first came that was like, look at all these different people. They're like so different. And they have different backgrounds, and they're like coming together to the creativity that I saw, just like with multiple people. It was just beyond what I seen and experienced. And at the same time, I never questioned my identity, where I came from, because that foundation was built solidly by living in very homogenous country, living in Korea, just living with people who look like me. So the racism, like do I belong here, was never even a question.
Yeah. Well, and I think you answered your initial question in that in theory was the great experiment. What would it be like to create a nation, a society, a system outside of oligarchy, which if I was escaping European oppression or persecution because of religious persecution, then the hypothesis was that we could create a society where varied people could coexist, as well as people could change their station within a lifetime, which was not the case for those that were exiting Europe or other countries. And yet, what you said is so poignant, because I think there's something, if I could go back, right, in my Wayback Machine, that is missing when people have no connection to where they came from. And that is where the experiment started to die out, is in coming here, then all of a sudden we were asked to assimilate again. the price of entry was to give up your culture, give up your language, in some cases even change your last name to make it more Americanized. And so, like all experiments, there's trial and fail and some gains and some wins, and the nerdy social scientist in me hopes that we're still running the experiment, and we will continue to learn from our failures and course correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because the assimilation is really a big part of immigrants' life. A lot of immigrants that come to America, we've heard lots of different stories about just, like you said, change the name, learning the language, and just to kind of try to forget where you come from, become here. And then some kids or people who've done that, it's almost like a full circle moment that I've met where, oh, okay, I've done all of that, including myself. And now looking back, okay, so then where do I come from, where do I belong? Because in the end, I realized you never truly belong in America as an American by some people's definition, right?
Yes, and that's, you're right, it's an externalized definition that somebody else is defining, and now you're naming the way power and status play out within a society that has started to become, or some would say is very much an oligarchy in itself once again, meaning that power is concentrated at the top of a system within a few families, within a few family dynasties, whereas the masses, the hordes of individuals, do not have access to that type of wealth, that type of upward mobility within a generation or two. And so part of how we started to integrate different individuals within this system, within this society, was to recreate the same structures that we had been escaping, which is why so much of our work in DEI is very much centered on trauma and the ways that we bring trauma in ourselves from land to land. And even in trying to escape oppressive systems, we play out those same patterns. Just the same way, I was joking with you that I've started dating again. We'll take that offline. But, looking at the ways that I play out childhood trauma, play out family systems patterns in the partners that I choose. Similarly, we do that in creating societies. And so the ways that we ask people to give up themselves to fit into a society or an ecosystem, the way we ask you to melt, right? You use that language of a melting pot, melt into the soup and become that watered down soup, as opposed to a salad where it's all the different flavors and all the different textures, or I often describe it to children as a garden. You would never go to a garden and say, you know what, let's just change everything so it all looks exactly the same color, everything exactly the same shape and size. That's a farm, not a garden. Right? And so there is such an opportunity to rethink the ways that we imagine this society, and we play out the acting of society, which is in itself something that most people don't think about. They think that society is some way enacting on them, but you are integral to acting out society as well. The vision that you have, how do you make that active each day? How do you navigate diversity? How do you celebrate diversity? Like on this show, I see, as you've been moving from the first season, the second season, really trying to look and prioritize and think about diversity in the speakers that you have, in the topics that you consider. That's a conscious act.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like you just need to talk more about it and hear more about the differences. And, you know, just this was a great segue to, you know, unlearning. Because you do an unlearning series. Let's talk more about that, because, you know, as somebody who's part of the society and contributing as a society member, there are certain things that we've learned from the trauma and from our experiences from childhood all the way up, that you are conditioned or learn to act a certain way to fit in, or to stay within your lane, lack of better words, to say that. So then we're just ingrained, we're just conditioned, we're trained to do that. So one of the series that you're doing with your LTJ Global is to do an unlearning series. You're inviting guests and really talk about one of the examples of unlearning series that I found fascinating was the model minority episode. That was truly interesting to hear. You know, it was such a candid and honest conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, so I was listening to your episode on my laptop, and my 7-year-old came and walked up to me and said, "Unlearning? So you're gonna forget about something?" And then I had to think about, oh yeah. And he's like, "Why would you do that? Why would you forget something?" And then I had to, this is the way I explained to him, is that, well, if you learn bad habits and you don't want to repeat the bad habits that you learned and you want to correct yourself, then that's how you would unlearn.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, I think children invariably, especially right now, with children our age, you know, you've got 13 and 7, and I've got 11 and 9. There's just something about this time that they are existing in where they have so much more language for things that we did not have growing up. And in watching my children, and I imagine in watching your children, it becomes blatantly bright and kind of glaring in your face, all of the ways that you have been conditioned to exist within this society, which is Sherry Huber's research, that we are conditioned to exist within a given context, and society being a context, or within a family system. And so the art of unlearning is to say that I recognize, as you said, that there are behaviors, there are lessons, there are ways that I have been molded, compacted, made small to survive. And then the practice of questioning that often leads one to consider, am I surviving as though in fight or flight or freeze state, or am I actually thriving? Am I actually living? I was talking to a friend last night about the difference between moving through your life just attempting to avoid death versus moving through your life attempting to live fully each day. And so many of us, our fear of fully living is tied to the ways that we do not talk about death or celebrate death within the context of Western colonial United States of American society, unlike many other cultures around the world. We exist within a scarcity mindset. If you win, I'm losing.
Yeah.
If I win, then you have to lose. We exist constantly playing out status and role play. This comes from Joseph Moreno's work in psychodrama, where every conversation within relationships is about Who has more status in this moment? Who has more power? And so the practice of unlearning is to say, that's not living. that is not human relationship.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. And yet for many of us, it's so natural. We don't actually know anything other than that. And so you have to rewire the brain, the synapse connection, the ways that the body has been trained to release serotonin or cortisol. And just like a muscle at the gym, you've got to train it and train it and train it.
You know, that is so relevant right now, because that's what I've been going through that personally. And breathwork it was a game changer for me, because that status and the identity is, my identity has been wrapped around what I do for so long.
Yes. Yes.
And that was suffocating. I just couldn't do that anymore. Just one day, like, hey, this is not living. Like, just like survival. So fight or flight, like survival instinct for us humans. I think I was kind of done in the fight status for so long. I can't even remember when I was not in a fight status.
Yeah. Interesting that you referenced the episode on model minority myth. It's not the same, and yet there is a lot of writing when we talk about what is it to be first generation wealthy. And so as a Black girl growing up in a family that was first generation wealthy, there are lots of overlaps in that way that we expect, especially young women. Our mothers are maybe grappling with what it is to, at that time still called feminism, now we would refer to it as womanism, and to empower our daughters while also having very high expectations in how we produce in our careers, how we produce in our marriages, how we produce as mothers, while still being tied to Western ideas of beauty and sexism that is deeply embedded in that. Is there something in there that was married to your over-identification with doing is what makes you lovable? Yeah.
Yeah. Culturally, that's just what I knew. Just growing up, it's just like, what are you going to do next? So never looked in the present moment. I was never told. I never learned to enjoy the moment, present moment. That is just, so then like, okay, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do? What's after that? So then you just forget, just like missing the ride altogether, right? Just missing the journey of day-to-day joy. Little things that brings me joy, I just didn't even notice it. Just like coasting through whatever the highest status that I just needed to achieve. Then it's just like,
yeah,
it was a standstill. It was probably one of the biggest awakening moment of my entire life, just to stop and look around and see what am I doing? What is the purpose of this?
Yeah. And, I think for so many of us, myself included, that awakening moment when you finally ask yourself, or somebody else ask you, or you find your way there through whatever your self-reflection practice is. Who am I outside of the what I do, how I help, and what I've achieved? And that question I ask my clients all the time, and it can be months before they can start to whittle out some type of identity that isn't married to those three things. And there's a safety in that. There's a safety in not having to expose that most vulnerable part of ourselves, that core knowing, that core gift, if you will, that core expression. And again, that is at the root of DEI work. It is, how do you create little microcosms. An organization is a microcosm, an institution is a microcosm, that in that practice you allow people to untether their identity from what they're doing, how they're helping, what they're achieving. And in that, they start to unlock a type of creative a light or expression, a type of flow state that, yes, it benefits organizations, organizations that help individuals unlock that, outperform their competitors at, almost 200%. Ridiculous. You go read a paper. But when you help foster environments that allow people to do that, it's like you said, in that moment coming here of recognizing all of that potential of what could be, what might come into being. And again, sadly, so many people experience that for themselves that then they also don't look for it in others.
Right. So that you're mentioning that what we just talked about, if a company can provide a space like this for their employees to explore, then, like you said, the research shows that 200% more profits, just like the results of people excel at their job is undeniable. I wish I had a organizational experience where that was provided to me. It just hasn't. So I'd love to hear, so you work with lots of small, medium-sized businesses. Is there any good, success stories where this works, this DEI program works?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, at LTJ Global, we are ourselves trying to practice bringing to bear something that we can only envision. And so as growing consultancy, also with our SaaS tech platform, Sojourn DEI, our team is spread out around the US and to South America and parts of Canada, and we are also trying to figure out the secret sauce. And it's trial and error right now. Right. I wish there was a book I could give to people, and maybe one day I'll write it, but, and say, just do these things. But as we try to model that ourselves and then take that to our clients, what we have seen is these moments where something transcendent happens, or we say that our work is about transformation. And just last week, I was saying I was in Boston working with a client, and we used the work of play, which, again, play therapy is a very often used tool within the context of marital counseling, family systems counseling. And to be honest, DEI mostly is family systems counseling. Right? I'm doing a lot of counseling, going, does this same problem show up in your marriage? Should we just go ahead and get your wife in here too? Let's feed two birds out of one pool. But we took what was a sort of opportunity for people to share across their department's deliverables. And one of our consultants whispered into my ear, turn this into an actual game of musical chairs. And we started playing musical chairs in this co-working space with this nonprofit that is doing amazing work in the closing the gap in the digital divide within our country. And that playfulness that they hadn't had in a while, remembering to laugh, remembering how to compete, remembering how to be loud and use their voice, remembering how to celebrate one another. Later that afternoon, we took that into a development of their quarterly objectives and key results, and they took the play in there with them. Moments that just the day before had been tense and people were tentatively tiptoeing around conversations, suddenly they were playing again. And those sorts of breakthroughs are what we often see in organizations, where we remember our humanity again. We stop competing for others to lose and instead switch it to competing for us to collectively win with whatever it is we're trying to create a new building, solve a multi-generational problem, bring new energy products to market. It's about, again, unlocking people's creativity and then providing them with the skills to work across difference, because difference is required to solve important problems.
Exactly. It's just the differences of different perspectives in general, with different people with different background, with different perspective. When they come together to solve a problem, I truly believe that the problem will be solved more efficiently with a lot more creativity, just because you have different perspectives coming together with one purpose.
Yes.
So then, people management is probably one of the hardest things for any organizations, right? Because it's the humanity, it's like it could be one, right, as your work is that if your people are empowered to do their job, then the rest it'll take care of itself. But for a leader to even recognize that, to be at a place where they reach out to, hey, Lindsey, this is my problem. This is my organization's problem. Like, can you help us? I think that has to be, there's another level of awakening or just awareness for that person to recognize that this is DEI work is what we need in our organization. Yes.
Well, and to your point, I think one of the challenges that we face in the DEI industry at large right now is the politicization. It's one of those days, I'm not going to be able to say the word. The polarization, let's use that word today, of words like anti-racism, of an entire body of research of critical race theory, of the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the challenge that we face is a very a mass of people who do little to no research themselves on a topic. And a great writer have written about what happens when societies are built on people who consume language, consume media at a high level without any personal research or contextualization. I don't want to take us down. It's we're in the beginning of the spring, but you can watch historically as that often happens as a society is about to fail. Go research the fall of Rome, right? But there is something that we are up against in organizations where people think they know what DEI is. And then when we come in and we actually explain what DEI is, they go, that's it? It's all, what? It's train the people managers to actually treat people like humans. It's leadership development. It's developing better systems and policies and procedures. It's strategic development so that we can close the gap between our goals and what we did here and then have exponential results in the next 10, 20 years. Or, a lot of times as leaders now, I'm saying, do you even want to be here in the next 10 to 20 years? Because how you're operating right now makes me think that you want to be the Kodak of cameras. Remember, we used to all walk around with a Kodak, but Kodak was like, I don't think this digital thing's going to take off. This lean principles thing is going to take off. And now I'm not pulling a Kodak camera out of my pocket anytime. And organizations that are not embracing DEI or now are cutting their DEI budgets, they're not going to be here in 10, 20, 30
there
years.
Was there a big news of a U.S. House just dismantle the DEI program?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that got cut in the budget in order to pass a budget bill.
Yeah.
And there's an element of a pattern that we see when we are experiencing large social progress. We can call it putting our head in the sand, right?
Yeah.
When we experience large social progress, there's always a backlash.
Right.
And you can see that again across societies, across cultures, because when there is a concentration of power at the top, the desire is to push back around anything that would disseminate that power. Power can be used synonymously with wealth, right? And so the backlash is to be expected. And to me, it is a confirmation that you've accepted that you're not going to be here in the next 10 to 20 years. So
they're admitting that. So that it's like obvious. We can all see that. We can all see the power change and the people at power hold on to it. And so that means to me like, oh, we're doing something right.
Exactly. And I say that a lot to a lot of disheartened DEI leaders, or you know, even my leaders at organizations who are trying to advance their DEI work, is that this backlash is a sign that you're doing something right, because people are on par pretty lazy, and so they will not give energy to things if there's not some sort of fear, if there's not some sort of concern. And so the fire must be under their butt enough for them to motivate to action. Because to push back against a tide takes a lot of energy.
It does. It does. But that's when that's to me, like, that's where the change happens. That's where maybe I am just, whenever you're like go against the norm, like what's different? What can we do something about it so that we're not just along for the ride? Like, can we make conscious effort to change something that's not going for us, right? So that's kind of how I live. That's kind of principle that I live by. And then that's where, so DEI to me, like, I want this to be tangible. I want this work, I think maybe, are we just like a fatigued? Like, it's just of the DEI word stuff, there's a language around DEI is thrown around a lot. And so I just want to go back to, you were saying, this is how simple as treating people with respect. I just want to go into like, what is the true essence, in your opinion, of the work that you do for DEI that's so tangible?
When I die, as we all do, when I die, my hope is that people will tell my children that I was three things. One, I was a relationship builder. Two, that I was an artist. And three, that I was a great storyteller. And I think ultimately that is what DEI leaders do. They help people build relationship. And we are living at a devastating moment where many people are playing at relationship but have absolutely no idea how to be in relationship to another human. They are trying to extract something. They are trying to have power over someone. They are trying to have some sort of personal trauma of theirs assuaged. That's not relationship.
What is true relationship then?
Beautiful question. The practice of being in relationship is, first I must be in relationship to myself. And so I've answered that question. What am I outside of doing, helping, and achieving? I'm able to tap into that core relationship with myself which then in that, and wherever you want to enter into the work, whether you want to enter it through your religious practice, whether you want to enter it through quantum physics, right? Whether you want to enter it in through the natural world, choose your language. We all, at our core, understand that disconnection from things is actually a myth, right? I am you, and you are me. The play of this chair is somehow separate from me, this chair is somehow separate from me, this plant is somehow separate from me. Every story that we have reminds us that that is a fabrication. And so as I expand outside of that fabrication, I once again realize that to know you is to know myself. And I cannot know myself fully without knowing you. Just as I can't know myself fully without knowing this plant. Just as I cannot know myself fully without watching ants go about their business in a given day. Human relationship requires a type of stillness that many of us are running from every day. It requires a type of vulnerability that many of us are running from every day. It requires a type of healing that many of us are running from every day. But when you begin to tap into that, then you are both inviting more of your true essence out while simultaneously inviting the other person's, right? They feel it in relationship to you, right? The invitation to be more themselves in your presence. You don't have to ask for it. You don't have to reach for it.
Right.
They breathe it in your presence. But you also feel it in yourself. And so that type of relationship building, to something you said earlier, I always say to managers, if you tell me about your childhood trauma, I'll be able to pinpoint where you're failing as a leader, right? Or tell me about how you received love in your home, and I'll tell you about where you're failing as a leader.
Man, that connection, I don't I don't know how many people will connect that as the source, right? That is to me, that's such an eye-opening, because oftentimes me, work and that personally is separate. It's a separate thing. Oh, I'm just gonna perform. This is a work, and personal me is totally different. So there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Never, right? I love this idea. Even, I was a contemporary dancer for the first part of my life, and they would say, leave yourself at the door. And it made sense in that the idea was that you leave your problems at the door and you sacrifice to the stage or to the muse. It made sense when I was younger, but as I get older, or it made sense based on what I knew at the time and the way I had been conditioned. But then what's so fascinating is that in the world of dance, simultaneously at all times, you are being asked to bring your full self, right? That is why we watch performance, because you're watching the performer communicate their own pain in such a way that you go, I've known that pain, or their own joy or sensuality in such a way that you go, I've known that joy, I've known that sensuality. And so there is no, I leave myself when I walk into work and I just do work, because to harness your creativity on whatever project you're working on, I need your stories.
Yes.
I need your lived experiences.
Yes. Yep.
I need your view of the world.
Truly.
And that means I invariably have to understand that you're having troubles in your marriage at some point. You're struggling with motherhood or fatherhood or any sort of care or relationship. Bring that.
Yeah.
But so many leaders, when I first start working with them, nobody's ever demanded that of them.
Right. Right.
And so they don't know how
True.
to reciprocate it. Which is, I love the newer generations coming into work.
Yeah.
Because they're just like, no, I'm gonna be crying in this meeting. It's fine, in my Snuggie, you know, with my therapy dog in my lap. And I'm like, and I love that for you, because they are also teaching me. My team member, she's now a co-founder of LTJ Global, Jay Alba. She taught me to cry, right? She taught me to cry. And you know, we can joke about it in terms of watching her mature in her career as she's come up, and now she works from wherever she is in the world. We play Where's Waldo with Jay, and where are you today as you join a meeting, which is the joys of virtual working and having a virtual office. But she once said to me, I do not feel as though I can be truly myself with you because I know that you hide parts of yourself from me. And we had this great conversation about what it is to be a Black woman in this society as a founder, and being invited to cry is just not something that nobody makes space for a Black woman's weakness, for an Asian woman's weakness, right? But she said, I demand it. You're half my age. You don't demand anything from me, right? But it was the invitation.
Yes.
She was demanding my humanity so that hers could be fully appreciated and revealed.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. This is such a revolutionary concept, yet such a human concept. And I was, as you're talking about this, just relating as human, just crying, as simple as that. But taking that concept as this principle to workplace and the work that you are doing, I'm just like, it's such a huge impact. Like the impact you're creating in organizations is so huge, because it's the sum of the individuals, right?
Yes.
And to me, this is the next, if any organizations that are thinking of what are we going to focus on in the next few years for our employees or as a company as a whole, this work that you are doing, this has to be it.
Yes. And I love when you say organizations, because I invite everybody to hear that as organisms. Organizations are living organisms, right?
Yes.
People who are in some sort of symbiosis. They are all relying on one another.
Yes.
And the organism must thrive, must be alive. And yet you walk into so many organizations, some of our clients when we start, and everything feels dead.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, imagine a tree and all the roots are dry and rotted, and that dust inside.
Yeah.
And then it's, how do I wake this organism up?
Yeah.
And yes, I truly believe this is the future of work, which work is a manifestation of what we believe about society. And if you believe that society is an opportunity for individuals to coexist, to store resources and share those resources, to have some sort of common defense against threat. Now we can get into a whole nother conversation about what is real threat versus what is fabricated threat, or what is threat based on internalized racism, internalized, another podcast. But that is the society, as we come together in order to have these shared beliefs, this shared goal. And so if the organization or the organism is just an extension of that, and we believe that we are trying to have a healthier society, then that must be reflected in our organizations.
Right.
If it's reflected more in our organizations, that'll change our institutions, because what we are training people, we will say, this is a skill you must have. You must have this skill to practice human connection. If we change our institutions, that means that our schools will change, secondary, middle school, primary school, how we are thinking about kindergarten, and then parenting will also change. We'll say to parents, these are skills. Stop worrying about math, stop worrying about the alphabet, and teach your child that there's enough toys here for them to have some toys and this other child to have some toys, and that them playing with their toy does not mean that they are now absent of toys, right? Which is basic kind of Montessori training. And so you had asked a question about models that we see in the world, and I actually think the most natural place for this to develop right now would be out of Reggio, Italy. Reggio is a small town in Italy that has developed an education model that people can go to Reggio, Italy to study, that is very much about a child-centered model. If I want the child to be able to read, for example, then I have to make sure that the child has food, that the child has housing, that the child is clothed, but also, do the carers read? If I want the carers to read, then I have to make sure that the carers have food, that they have housing, that they have clothing. Did their carers read? And so it's this ripple effect out from there. And the idea of this child-centered society, I think that we can manufacture that same thing here, which is we do that all the time, right? This idea of we want to speed up the process by which cars can be developed, Industrial Revolution. We can start with a new vision, a new dream, and then consciously build it. And that comes back to why we unlearn. We consciously built this society that we exist in now, which means that we can just as consciously build something different.
I love that. This is such a great, right before we end this episode, yes, unlearn. Everything you said, I can't wait for your work spreading to so many different people, so many different organizations. This is really, truly the essence of how we are going to change for the next generation. So how often do you do, where can I watch Unlearning?
Right now we do Unlearning every first Wednesday of the month. We do a live recording. People join from all over the world. You can find it at ltjglobal.com/unlearning to register. And then there's always a recording available afterwards to make sure that people tell me they watch it at all sorts of random places, right? You know, out on their runs or hiking, or they have little dates and watch it with friends. So that always makes me happy.
Great. And your LTJ Global is the website where people can check out more information. And SOOR DEI is the app that you developed specifically for small, medium-sized businesses. Truly a blueprint, right, of this work. Then it's not, you laid it all out for them. Yeah.
What we found was there was a huge gap in that our consulting side, those clients are much, 1,000 plus and very dedicated to the work, but there were these small and mid-size companies or nonprofits, 10 people, 50 people, 300 or 500 people that really wanted to do the work, but their budgets had been cut, or it was hard to find a grant that would fund the work. And so SOOR DEI was our love letter back to them to say, here we've taken everything that we've done in consulting and we've built it in an information system, but you can still have a dedicated DEI manager just at a click of a button. And so someone like me is on the other end to help you get through little challenges or explain how to implement something. And it's the difference between, six-figure contracts down to $149 a month.
Wow, that's great. You know, I wish we could sit down forever and talk about so many different topics. I'd love to have you back, talk about racism, talk about parenting, talk about, there's so many different topics we can go from this core of what you believe in. You know, so thank you for your work.
Thank you.
This conversation has been so great. I think we were relating person, like the relationship that you defined. I felt that. I felt how we were able to relate as a human.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I know you are doing that wherever you go, and hopefully the viewers will see that and will reach out to you.
Thank you for this time.
Thank you.